My top 10, number 5 reason for thinking these hijackers were fake. They could not have flown the planes. Neil Sagavan, among others, who's a pilot and aeronautical engineer, has studied their training background, and it's simply preposterous to presume these guys who could barely get a Cessna off the ground could have piloted a commercial airliner and brought it to its target. It's preposterous.
None of the alleged hijackers were good pilots, according to the flight schools. The person accused of flying into the Pentagon was failing his courses at the Arizona Flight School, but he continued to pay for training anyway. The New York Times quotes one employee. He didn't care about the fact that he couldn't get through the course. I'm still to this day amazed that he could have flown into the Pentagon. He could not fly at all. At 30,000 feet above the clouds, just finding New York or Washington is difficult without assistance from air traffic controllers. Yet these poorly trained, inept pilots executed perfect, highly skilled direct flight paths to their targets. This is the cockpit of a 757. No one can see through the clouds below. How could a pilot this bad have the flight controllers comment, "The steep turn was so smooth, it's clear there was no fight for control going on"?
Top 10 reason number 4. Those cell phone calls that we've heard so much about could not have been made at the altitudes and speeds these planes were flying. A.K. Dubney, a professor of computer science from Western Ontario, has taken cell phones of different makes and models on different flights around the country and discovered at altitudes above 2,000 feet and speeds above 230 miles an hour that cell phone connections become fewer and farther between. They would have been impossible. And that, of course, would include the one you've all heard about from alleged passenger Mark Bingham, where he calls his mother and says, "Mom, this is Mark Bingham." You believe me, don't you? Top 10 reason number 3. During the trial of the alleged 20th hijacker, Zacarias Moussaoui, a tape recording was played allegedly from Flight 93, which included the passengers discussing how they were going to attempt to break down the cabin door using a drink cart. One astute student of the case wrote me to point out that this was ostensibly a cockpit voice recording, and that cockpit voice recorders do not record voices in the passenger compartment. Top 10 reason number 2 why these hijackers appear to be fake. The last words attributed on that tape to the hijackers who were facing imminent death was Allah Akbar, which is Arabic for God is great, God is great. According to a Muslim member of Scholars for 9/11 Truth, the last words that a devout follower of Islam should say when confronting imminent death is not those words, but rather, in Arabic, there is but one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. I therefore suggest that the writers assigned to this script simply didn't know enough to get it right. Number 1, top 10 reason number 1 for believing these hijackers were fake. Zacarias Moussaoui, this April, was subjected to a trial to determine whether he should be punished by life imprisonment or even death for not coming forward to reveal the plot, which the government maintained, had he done, would have enabled the government to have intervened and saved lives. I make 3 observations. A year before, Zacarias Moussaoui confessed to a different plot. He had acknowledged that he had been involved in a plot to fly a plane into the White House in order to extort release of a terrorist, a sheik who had been imprisoned for terrorist activities in 1993. He denied he had anything to do with 9/11. A year later, the federal government has played a shell game, and now they're insinuating and implying he had something to do with 9/11. As my good friend Webster Tarpley has observed, this man had no obligation to come forward and to confess his involvement in a plot, even if he had been involved in 9/11. We still have something here known as the Fifth Amendment. He had no obligation to incriminate himself. Third, and most tellingly, and this must have been incredibly embarrassing to the government, an FBI agent testified he'd been following Moussaoui. He'd been observing him taking this flight training. He had suspected that he might be involved in a terrorist plot, even to fly planes into the trade towers, though he suggested later that was merely a lucky guess. He testified under oath that he had told his superiors about his suspicions, not once, not twice, 70 times. And I say to you, 5 or 6 might be excused as ordinary incompetence. 20 or 25 may be criminal neglect. 70 times has to have been a matter of direct policy, deliberate policy. They were keeping these guys in reserve so they could use them as their cover story when the government itself perpetrated these dastardly terrorist acts.